In preparing for the cold open this week, as we always do, I thought that I had something in my back pocket that was unique, that maybe was like, well, it certainly is unique. Let me preface it by saying that, but I thought that it was a little bit more niche.
Yeah,
that's what I will say, and I kept it in my back pocket intentionally. And I didn't tell Jeremy about it because I wanted to surprise him, like he's surprised me so many times, with the pudding fingers ad. And so we show up to the studio today, get ready to record, get the equipment going, turn the lights on.
Yeah,
that our humble patrons keep on.
The studio wakes up from its deep slumber.
Exactly. The weekly hibernation. Anyway, I digress. And I pull up and I'm like, yo, I got a cold open today. And he's like, oh, really? Because I do too. And I'm like, oh, for real? And we find out that it's this new ad. We both came through with this new ad. He had the same idea I did. Wanted to keep it in the back pocket so you could surprise each other. But it's a new ad that DeSantis War Room just dropped, which is like the official Twitter account that's affiliated with Ron DeSantis.
It's not a PAC. It's a real DeSantis account, officially affiliated. Yeah.
There's a good chance that DeSantis himself probably saw this and was like, ha 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 ha, that's funny.
Yeah. That's very true.
That's very true.
This really gets my good side. Yeah, there's a really good chance you saw this. We came through with the same idea. You know, we're both fiends for the ad series.
Have to.
But this is, I think, officially our third entry in the ad series.
And I will say that this one is probably the most video heavy.
It is ridiculous.
So I do have to encourage you to please go to the YouTube video we're posting and watch it there, or look it up on your own. You can probably figure out what to type in. I don't want to spoil anything to try and look it up, but I think we should get that shit going.
All right, let's get right into it.
I will do everything in my power to protect our LGBTQ citizens.
If Caitlyn Jenner were to walk into Trump Tower and want to use the bathroom, you would be fine with her using any bathroom she chooses.
That is correct.
In the future, can transgender women compete in Miss Universe?
Yes.
Make America great again.
Psych!
Oh, God. It's so bad.
After the psych, it's just B-roll of Ron DeSantis and pictures of Ron DeSantis, and then just headlines about how he's taken away rights from gay people. Like, during the whole Trump segment, it's headlines.
Think of anything more.
Oh my God, dude.
It really has shut down drag.
Just produced some of the harshest, most draconian laws that literally threaten trans existence.
Congratulations, Ron DeSantis. Mission accomplished. You win.
And that's where I cut it off, because the rest of it is just that music and more headlines saying, like, Ron DeSantis is literally Hitler 2.0.
Yeah, no, because that's literally
Ron
what
DeSantis
they say.
wants to put gay people in a concentration camp.
That's basically it. And then in the Trump segment, all of the headlines are like, oh, Trump says that he would be okay with a trans woman using the bathroom that matches their gender identity.
Yeah.
Like, that's it. And then it was a picture of, like, a Gays for Trump shirt. Mm-hmm. And they're like, wow, look at this guy. He supports the community.
So my question is, like, I don't know if this was a specific ad that was like is going to run on people's television screens. I don't think it is.
There's no way.
I think it's just kind of like a shit post that Ron DeSantis and his team came up with, or the DeSantis War Room came up with it, or whatever, or maybe a fan came up with and they reposted, whatever it is. My question is, though, right? You hear the format. If you're watching on YouTube, you see the format. Who is this for?
Yeah.
If old people, like, say, persuadable Trump voters see this, they're going to be like, what the fuck am I looking at? They don't understand young people edits.
No.
They're not going to know what's going on with, like, the eyes and, like, the Chad
and the Chad
face.
meme and, like, the lightning and the crazy edit. Like, it's a shit post.
Yeah, it's a shit
ruin
post.
through.
Yeah.
Like, this is for, like, YAF members, really.
Yeah. And no, it's like crazy to me, because, again, if a persuadable Trump voter that maybe is considering DeSantis sees this, they're going to be like, what the hell am I looking at? If a young person sees this, chances are they already don't like Ron DeSantis. Most young people are voting Democrat, and the small section that might be voting for Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis probably already have their minds made up, I would think. So, like, who is this for? It's just so fucking stupid, and it's so corny seeing Ron DeSantis do it, because bro is a meatball.
And it's so also bad. Like, most people are generally, we talked about it a couple episodes ago, but most people are generally in support of most of the trans culture war items, except for, like, women's sports.
Yeah.
That's the one that leans more conservative, but most of the other issues lean more liberal. And even more people are more overwhelmingly in support of just LGBT stuff in general.
Right.
And don't really have, like, that crazy of an opinion on it. And when you're flashing headlines that are literally Ron DeSantis takes away rights from this community, Ron DeSantis bans drag.
No, 'cause
you show a pundit getting on and saying Ron DeSantis is literally evil, but like that's the good thing.
Yeah.
But that's on the good side of the ad. And then you contrast that with Trump saying that he supports issues that most Americans are fine with.
Right, and this is a dude from Florida.
Yeah.
What are you doing? There's gays in Florida.
like you just humanized Trump. I feel like most Americans.
You just made Trump look moderate. That is a testament to how fucking deranged Ron DeSantis and his team is. Like, one of the headlines is DeSantis signs most extreme slate of anti-trans laws in modern history.
On the good side of the ad, this is what DeSantis has been doing. Chad on the Chad side of the ad.
Like, you gotta be crazy if you think this is appealing to anybody. This is pure culture war. When Trump is talking, if you can't see the video, when Trump is talking, they have like a transparent edit of a pride flag over top of his face to make him seem like, oh, he's gone woke. You tell me Trump has gone woke?
Come on.
What the hell?
Come on now. Who for a second is going to believe that Trump is a liberal? It is any of this, especially when he is coming out now more to the right. Like, he is coming out more because of how Ron DeSantis has continued to push the Overton window to the right with regards to these issues. Trump's moved more right on all of these things. Yeah. These are all clips from like 2016 and prior.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, none of them are recent too. Like, it blew my mind.
This has never worked on Donald Trump, right? Like, you could pull up the clip from 20 years ago or something where Trump is like, yeah, I'm pro-choice. Like, I want people to be able to get abortions. It doesn't matter. Nobody cares.
And then he comes through and he's like, no, actually
I didn't
not.
say that.
Actually not.
Fake news. I don't know who that's for, but that's another incredible entry in the ad series.
He'll just come through, and hopefully, like, maybe he'd see it, and then he'd just deflect more. He needs to get back on Twitter.
I need him back on
These
Twitter.
Fights need to be, like, more public. Hopefully they don't exceed 600 tweets so I can see them.
Oh, for sure, yeah. If it goes past 600 tweets, I'm not going to be able to read them. That'd be really sad.
Maybe he'll pull up that one picture of him with, like, minors and alcohol and just Ron de Sex Pest.
I can't wait till we can make all those jokes, man. Just so you guys know, listening at home, we have been cooking so many Ron DeSantis jokes that we're saving up for the point when they're gonna, be most relevant.
The 4 weeks before the primaries, the couple weeks before the debates. You better get ready for the titles.
Debates at the end of the summer, like a month and a half away.
Oh my
I'm
God,
so
it's
ready.
so good.
Ron DeLoser's coming. Oh my God, it's gonna be great.
Excellent.
Ron DeSantis is an enemy of the people. Why didn't he put a Hiddo clip in that ad? You know what I'm saying?
We've talked plenty of shit. There's hours of us talking about him on
See,
that.
like, I have a hypothesis that a lot of content creators, like sometimes even like Hassan Piker or other big leftists that stream, will get put onto like clips on Fox News because they say something outrageous. I think Fox News and others just can't clip us because everything we say is too real. It's too good.
It's just fact.
We're almost shooting ourselves in the foot with publicity because we're just too correct.
It has nothing to do with like reach or anything. Like, I might as well just start spreading more misinformation willingly so that I can get the publicity, because you know what they say, no publicity is bad publicity.
I think they're scared of us. That's the Colleen Ballinger mindset right there, baby.
Oh, yeah, baby. I'm trying to hop on the toxic gossip train and get off right at manipulation station and get all of you.
Welcome back to Head in the Office, everybody. This is a bad news week.
Bad news week. Pretty packed and dense episode, but don't you forget what we announced last week.
Exactly.
We do have a special guest interview
at the end of this episode,
tacked on to the end with the University of Michigan Graduate Student Workers Union.
That's right. If you are the kind of listener that only listens through half the episode, only listens to the news stories you are really interested in, don't you dare do this today, because we got a really interesting interview at the end about the labor movement in the U.S., the labor movement in Michigan and Ann Arbor specifically. So I hope you guys stick around for that. It was a lot of fun and very interesting to talk to the guests that we had on. So hope you guys like that.
The majority of this episode is going to be dedicated to what you all can guess it's going to be dedicated to, and that's the absolute fucking plethora of Supreme Court decisions that just came through this week.
The emissaries of the devil that sit on what we call the Supreme Court, but what I recognize as like a portal into hell.
Really, it's a pentagram up there.
Yeah. We got to talk about all the Supreme Court decisions that came out. But before we get into the episode, as always, I'll remind you all to go check out the Patreon. But maybe more importantly than the Patreon for right now, is that we're having merch come out on Tuesday.
Yes, we are.
And if you're listening to this episode Wednesday, you're a Wednesday weenie, if you will.
No, Tuesday is
You can
4th
go
of
and get
July.
yourself some Head in the Office merch.
It's available.
By the time you're listening to this, we'll have pictures posted. You can see what we're offering. You can go check out the website,
Come on.
headintheoffice.com. Our merch is going to be there. Support the show. Get a little something to rep Hiddo.
Link in the description.
That's right.
You already know it's good. But after that, we got to hit the 5-star reviews.
Yeah, we only got
Also,
one.
incredibly important. We have one on Apple, one on Instagram.
That's absolutely right.
pretty slow week this week, but I'll take it.
On Apple, we got one review from Mikey Murder. They say, subject line, communism is bestism. Very simple, brief, concise review here. Mikey Murder says, that's all, hail Satan, and then some like rocker emojis, I guess. And the devil.
Let's go.
The little devil emoji, the purple one, you know what I'm saying?
Nice.
So thanks for the review. I agree with the first half of the message. Me, myself, I don't know about Satan, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, weird. Yeah,
Hot take, I'm coming out. Controversial take. Thank you for the review. I appreciate it.
We got the next review coming in on Instagram from Ash. Hi, I wanted to leave an Instagram review because currently I'm on a 12-hour road trip to move to a less conservative state out of Utah. Yikes. That's a big yikes. I have to add that part. And I'm listening to episodes so I know how to debate my parents about my trans identity. I'm
also
sorry
yikes.
for that.
Yeah.
Big yikes. Bigger yikes. Thank you for creating a podcast that is actually political and funny, not one that tries to be both and fails miserably. I appreciate the love you give the queer community and the visibility you give us. Y'all are some cool motherfuckers. Thanks for giving me political talking points as fuck. Heart.
Oh, we will always provide the political talking points. And, we
us.
love you beyond the parasocial relationship.
Exactly. It's very real. It's very, very intimate. You know?
Yeah. At a week when parasocial relationships are kind of in the spotlight because of a certain somebody who violated the sacred tenets of parasocial relationships. Just know that we love you in a way that isn't abusive.
Can't violate the parasocial relationship because it's not parasocial.
Precisely.
It's
Exactly.
incredibly social and incredibly real.
And we're very responsible with its application. Just so you know, we're not.
Yeah.
We are responsible content creators. We've never hurt anybody. We're here to provide you with the news, of course. Speaking of the news, let's get into it. First story we got to talk about is, actually, this whole episode is going to be dedicated to SCOTUS, but the first SCOTUS decision we got to talk about is them ruling at the very end of Pride Month, last day of Pride Month, that it's illegal to discriminate against LGBTQ people if you're a business owner.
Cool.
Yeah.
So sick. Excellent decision coming through out of that.
That's a very simple summation of what this decision is, but more specifically, the case is 303 Creative LLC versus Elenis. This is a case that we have signaled for a while is coming down the pipe. We knew we were going to get a decision about it, this SCOTUS term, and we finally got it. And I low-key did forget that this was when the SCOTUS term was ending. And then I just saw all this society ending.
I also
stuff
forgot
happen.
to. I knew that it was going to come up soon, and I was really just waiting for the Moore v. Harper decision, which we'll get to later.
Yeah.
But I wasn't expecting it all to just drop.
Yeah, exactly.
I
And
feel
it's,
like last
really
year
bad.
it was like a drip feed, like 2 every week.
Yeah. We got the innocence isn't enough.
Oh,
We got the
that
Miranda
was
rights
such a
one,
crazy
yeah.
ruling. Oh my
Yeah,
god.
people have forgotten about that. I feel like people just didn't care about it, but we covered it.
Yes, we did.
And we made some clips about it. You can go check it out if you want to. But back to this decision, it was a 6-3 decision. The Supreme Court ruled that business owners cannot be made to serve members of the LGBTQ if the owner has a claim that it violates their First Amendment rights. Now, I've seen some people argue, and I think this decision was written by Neil Gorsuch. I've seen some people argue that the application is going to be narrow because he said it's purely free speech. It's purely a matter of free speech. It doesn't have to do with businesses that are providing something other than free speech. For those that don't know, this case concerned a wedding website specifically. You can see where that kind of leads. But I've seen some people argue that it's only going to consider services and goods that have to do with free speech. But I don't know how you enforce that. And from my perspective, I saw nothing in the opinion that suggests it's only businesses that are doing like artwork or something.
I thought the language in it either said or implied that it's something that involves like creative expression. I think he even akined that to like a gardener.
Yeah.
Doing something like that. And it's like, okay, that's a little much now.
Right. But see, the issue is that you've already set the precedent that free speech can be used as grounds to reject LGBTQ people from services that you offer. So why the only way that I see this going, if the court remains 6-3 conservative, is more cases come to the Supreme Court regarding the rejection of members of the LGBTQ or perhaps racial minorities, ethnic minorities, and this just keeps getting expanded. That's the only way I see this going,
like,
right?
From my understanding of the case, I thought that this was going to be about like religious freedom, like your religious right to discriminate, basically. That's what I thought it was.
There was
gonna
inklings
be.
of that in the opinion.
There have been inklings, but they decided to like curb that and instead take it from like a compelled speech angle. And what they are saying here is that the government cannot compel you to make speech that you don't want to make, even if that speech is like what would be good. Like as you don't have to. The government can't tell you what to say.
Right.
And they are saying that the government in enforcing anti-discrimination laws cannot tell you that you have to make a website for a gay wedding if that's not what you want to do.
Yeah. And more specifically, what happened here was it was in Colorado. Colorado had a law, or still has a law, that said if you want to do business in the state, you can't reject your business to people on the basis of being in a protected class, LGBTQ being a protected class. And they challenged this law, got up to the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court said, yeah, Colorado can't force you to do business in that way if you don't want to, which is why they're saying, yeah, the government can't compel this kind of speech, which I think is fucking stupid.
I think that's stupid too.
Yeah.
I think that's very dumb because it's like it's such a weird thing.
Right.
Like, I feel like the case itself is so weird, and the weirdest part about it, honestly, is just how it got brought up. Because whatever her name is at 303 Creative didn't even
Satan, I think.
Satan, the devil herself. Like, y'all want to talk about how God is a woman? Anyway,
the spawn of Margaret Thatcher, perhaps. All the same, really.
Nothing even really happened.
No, literally nothing happened. She made it up.
The whole Supreme Court case is based on a hypothetical, which one isn't even supposed to be allowed to happen at the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
And two, it's like based on a hypothetical of a hypothetical because she went and she got the case initially drafted, or whatever she was doing initially was based on Colorado anti-discrimination law.
Yeah.
You can't post something saying you're going to discriminate against gay people.
Yeah.
And she said, well, actually, I have this letter that I want. I'm not even she's like, okay, I'm at 303 Creative. I'm not even designing websites yet, but I want to.
Yeah. She hadn't designed a website at this point.
I want to expand my business and start designing websites. But before I do that, I want to let people know that I will not design a website celebrating a gay marriage. And she didn't even post that letter, but she said, it would be illegal if I did post that letter and I'd get in trouble because of anti-discrimination laws. So I'm not going to do that and do like the civil disobedience that's usually required to get something litigated like that.
Right.
I'm going to go and then litigate my hypothetical because this is something I want to do. And I'm going to get this taken all the way up to the highest court in the land.
Yeah.
Like if there is anything that tells you that this institution is not to be respected, it should be that right there.
It's love of the game. Pure,
my
unadulterated love of the game. Like how else do you describe that? Especially because one of the key documents in this case was simply an email from some guy saying, I want to have a website for my gay wedding and I want to use you as the service for it. We later found out from I think a New Republic article that was made up. And the guy in the story that contacted him, the guy that supposedly sent the email, has been married to a woman for 15 years and himself is a website designer. They just lied.
I think he's come out and said that he has had no involvement with this whatsoever. Like they just made it. They're just lying on his name on public document. Is that not perjury?
Like, okay, if you guys don't know, to get to the Supreme Court, or really just to have like litigation in general, you need standing, right? There's got to be some kind of harm proved, or some kind of harm alleged, or some reason that you're doing it. How does something get all the way up to the Supreme Court? How does the Supreme Court take on a case that has no standing, or if you want to argue their standing, they made it up?
She got up there and she's like, well, I mean, I could be kind of inconvenienced by Colorado's law when I have to maybe make a website for a gay person, even though there are probably clear signals on my design page that would make any gay person reasonably stay away from me anyway. I really want to let them know that I don't want to do it. And that I want to publish that, but the fact that I can't really hurts.
Yeah. And it's like, it's funny to joke about how like all of this is just completely absurd, of course. But to me, that just reveals that the point of this wasn't actually to protect her business interests or her personal beliefs or free speech or anything like that. It was just to signal that the Supreme Court is not on the side of gay people and that they are okay with businesses discriminating against you, even if you apply the narrow ruling of it's just for free speech, compelled speech by the government. But I think it's going to be extended, or people are going to try to extend it beyond just to include anything.
Absolutely, because now it's like if you are part of or I guess if you want to discriminate against a protected class and you're in a creative field, you can. Yeah. Like if you want to, if someone as a member of a protected class comes up to you and says they want to do something with you that maybe could be related to their status as a person in a protected class, you can just say no on the basis of that, which is crazy.
Right.
Like, it's nuts that you can just say, oh, this class is now unprotected in this instance.
Well, and like, what does protected class even mean at that point?
Yeah.
And my question here is, where does it end? Obviously, this deals directly with the LGBTQ, which is apparent based on the facts of the case. But there's also, like, can they refuse to serve you if you're black and they disagree with you being black?
Did you say Gorsuch wrote this opinion?
Yeah, Neil Gorsuch. Yeah.
Didn't he vote for the case a couple years back that established, like, the LGBTQ as a protected class?
I don't remember. Maybe. Either way,
because I think there was something that because the
guess.
Trump administration was litigating that, like, I don't know, being gay was not protected under protected classes, and they ended up losing the argument, and the Supreme Court established that, yes, being gay, being a part of the LGBTQ is a part of being a protected class under something to do with, like, discrimination based on sexual identity or sex.
Okay.
Something like that.
Yeah, I have no idea. Maybe.
Nuts.
Either, I mean, if that is the case, he's switching up now. He's just not agreeing now. But also, of course, it applies to, like, other minorities. Like, can you reject serving a Muslim person because they're Muslim? Can you reject serving a Jewish person? Like, this, my point here is that, like, if our chief concern is freedom and protecting people's freedoms, a free society doesn't look like one where there's signs up in doors that say no gay people allowed, no Jewish people allowed, no black people allowed. Like, I thought we went through this already. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I thought we already went through the kind of, I don't know, business by business segregation, and we decided that was bad,
And
right?
we didn't just, like, get our way. We didn't free market our way out of it.
No,
we
exactly.
didn't free market our way out of, like, Jim Crow.
Right, and that was something I wanted to bring up too, because I've seen a lot of people on the conservative side that clearly agree with this ruling argue that it's like freedom of association, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is like obviously it's bad to, like, hate minority groups, or they might not even say that, but they'll imply, like, yeah, we shouldn't be hateful, but it's freedom of association, so people can do whatever they want. First of all, easy to say when you're a cishet white guy, or you're not going to face any kind of societal discrimination. Yeah, like, easy position to take. But also, yeah, we didn't freedom of association our way out of segregated South, right?
So silly.
Like, we didn't get out of segregation by using freedom of association.
And it's like, I just don't get it, because, like, this whole discourse led to a banger tweet by Ben Shapiro where somebody replied to one of his, like, comments about the case and said, Ben, this could imply that I could put up a sign in my business that said no Jews allowed and you wouldn't be allowed.
Right.
And then he quote tweeted their reply and said, yeah, that's perfectly fine. Mm-hmm. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Come on, dog.
Well, it's because, right, he doesn't anticipate that happening to him.
Mm-hmm.
Him, as someone who's mostly seen as just some white conservative guy,
Yeah.
he's not afraid that he's going to face any discrimination, because right now the ire is targeted towards LGBTQ people, of which he's not a member of that group. So, of course, he's going to be like, yeah, go ahead and do it, because he's not going to be the one facing discrimination.
Mm-hmm.
It's a super easy and, quite honestly, lazy position to take.
It's so fucking silly. I thought this case was probably one of the most, like, mind-blowing and, like, what?
Yeah.
Just the sheer shock factor, because, like, we'll get to it later. I figured student loans would go the wrong way, and I figured affirmative action was going to go the wrong way. I think a couple episodes ago I like made my predictions. Somebody can go back and pull it up and tell me if I was right or wrong. But I feel like I said this was going to go right, and it did not.
Yeah,
it absolutely did not, because it's just pro discrimination.
Yeah, no, that's all it is. And, like, hot take maybe, you shouldn't be allowed to discriminate against people in society if you want to, like, own a business or operate in any way where you have some kind of power, whether it be economic or political, over other people. That just shouldn't be something you're allowed to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, we don't create a free and open society where a free and open society is not one where we allow bigotry to exist.
Yeah.
And with this ruling, not only allow, but almost encourage bigotry to exist. Like, that just isn't a free society to me. And I feel like if we want to protect freedom, then having laws that explicitly say, if you want to operate your business here, you cannot reject somebody on the basis of them being in a protected class, is perfectly fine. I feel like that's like a sort of social contract
Isn't
thing.
that part of, like, a principle of democracy as well?
Yeah.
Like, people can come through and they can say, okay, yeah, we don't want businesses here who are willing to do this.
Right.
So you can't be in this community if you're going to do this. You should go somewhere else.
Well, yeah, and it's like, it's a social contract, right? If you want to make money in this society, in our capitalist world, then you are expected to be open to all people regardless of what their identity is.
Yeah.
I feel like that's not a big ask. And I don't think that's a violation of anybody's rights. If you want to make money, this is what you got to do.
And even with regards to like compelled speech and how the government shouldn't compel you to speak a certain way about anything, sure, maybe the government shouldn't the government should not compel you to say specific things, but they should compel you to not discriminate.
Yeah.
That's really it.
Yeah.
Like,
well, because like the low-hanging fruit here is like, look at the 50s and 60s, right? Like, we didn't get rid of bigotry and racism all across the South by, like, just, again, using freedom of association, letting people figure it out on their own.
Yeah.
We enforced it, and there were massive protests, and there was a whole movement dedicated to getting rid of this kind of discrimination. And eventually we passed laws that said, hey, yeah, you're not allowed to do this. And that's what it took to get rid of segregation back then. We're not going to get away from bigotry now by using some other technique. The only way to do it is to suffocate it. If you want to eradicate hate from a society, you got to snuff it out. And you have to be purposeful about it.
it's like I've seen so many people get on and start talking about things like, oh, well, should an artist have to paint this painting of like, if a veteran wants to commission an artist to paint a picture of like war or like something like this.
Veteran's not a protected class.
Exactly. And they refuse based on their motives. It's like veteran's just not a protected class.
Right.
And the whole thing that is being litigated here, there are a myriad of reasons why you would want to deny an artistic service to someone based on like anything. Pretty much the one thing that you shouldn't, not can't, because you can now, but shouldn't be able to deny a service to someone is for being gay. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Come on.
And again, like, a lot of people will go to religious beliefs and say, oh, well, it's a violation of my religious belief, and you think it's a violation of your, you know, your personal freedoms. So we're kind of just like at an impasse. It's like, well, okay, but yeah, your religious beliefs are fucking stupid.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Your
Like,
religious
I
beliefs
don't
are
care.
bigoted and wrong and shouldn't work. Don't work within this
If we
society.
were in a just society, the Supreme Court would say, fuck off, and if you want to do business, you'll have to listen to the rules just like everybody else. But we don't live in a just world, and the Supreme Court is off its goddamn rocker.
So nuts.
Yeah.
I guess that's it for this banger of a ruling. Time to move on to the next one.
Yeah, we got we got two rulings up next, both concerning education.
Oh, yeah.
Both very different aspects of education, both very bad for education.
So bad.
In this country. The first one we're going to talk about is the student debt decision that we just got. So the Supreme Court just ruled that Biden can't do what he wanted to do. So in another insane ruling, the Supreme Court decided 6-3 that Biden's attempted student debt forgiveness under the HEROES Act is unconstitutional. If you don't remember, this was an executive order back in October of 2022 that was aiming to give $10,000 in debt relief to people making under $125,000 a year, $20,000 up to $20,000 for Pell Grant recipients, and that Pell Grants are limited in some way. It's mean tested somehow. I don't remember the exact numbers, but for the most part, this money was going to people that weren't rich. Actually, for the entire part, this money was not going to people that were not rich.
Yeah,
right.
It was wiping out debt for people who were not making over like $100,000 a year, or something like that.
And some 40 million Americans were either enrolled or at least eligible for this program.
Yeah.
And it was going to be like transformational for millions of people. And the Supreme Court just said, because it was not explicitly approved by Congress, it's not allowed to happen. Even though the HEROES Act explicitly says the Department of Education is allowed to cancel and forgive debts during a time of national emergency, which of course COVID was. So that's kind of the basis for this ruling.
I really just don't get it.
Yeah.
Like, I really just don't understand how they could like what is unconstitutional about this? Just the fact that they didn't get approval from the legislature. The legislature previously approved it when they passed the HEROES Act.
In 2019.
That's how the fucking that's how laws work. Like, so now can you can you go and look at any government action and say, or action by the executive office and say, well, this wasn't approved by Congress, therefore it's unconstitutional.
Right.
Can you now litigate any of those actions up to the Supreme Court, or can you only litigate them up there if, I don't know, it has something to do with the culture war that the conservatives have got onto, or it helps people?
Yeah, like, does Congress have to explicitly tell the executive to take every step that it does? That's not how our government works.
You can't have a government
never
that
worked
works
like that, right?
Supreme Court pro-bureaucracy now?
Right.
Conservatives pro-bureaucracy?
And the thing here that really gets me is that this Supreme Court specifically, is always going on about how originalist they are, right?
Yep.
Like, they read the text as it was written. But here, they're clearly doing some amount of mind reading when they say that this is not what Congress meant to do. Like, they didn't explicitly mean to do this. This was not their intent.
How would you know? How would you know?
How do you know? The text of the law says that the Department of Education can cancel debts during a time of national emergency. And they tried to do that, and you didn't let them.
I thought that the law was just the text. I thought that the law was plain as written.
Right. Right. Now, of course, this leaves room for Congress to cancel debts if they want to pass some law that cancels student debt.
Fucking happen.
Does some amount of student debt forgiveness. But of course, I think the Supreme Court is just banking on that never happening because we don't have enough votes in the Senate to do it, and right now there's no control in the House for the Democrats, so this is not going to happen.
And what is it? Gorsuch or Alito just got, or maybe it was Roberts. Any of them really could have been the person.
One of the 6 demons in human skin.
All done something crazy. I think was just the $1 billion or however many, the lavish vacations that they had gone on.
Alito,
were financed by a guy who had like a vested interest in this case. So,
what the fuck are we doing?
He just bought a vote.
It's crazy how I was reminded of this Abraham Lincoln quote a while ago. Well, I guess when he was alive, long time ago, that he was saying something like, if the Supreme Court can just legislate on their own, then people cease to rule themselves, right?
Yeah.
Because it's an unelected body of officials that can write laws, and they're no longer accountable to anybody in the general public. You just can't do anything about them. We've known this. Abraham Lincoln knew this over 100 years ago, and we're still dealing with the same problem, doing nothing about it.
And it's crazy just how separate the judiciary is from the legislature and the executive branch. Like you can see the clear connections between legislation and what the president does. You can see how they interact. You can see how things unfold. But you don't really get that when it comes to judiciary. They just kind of go off and do whatever it is they want and then get bought.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's kind of my point here, is that the Supreme Court has totally ran away from any measures of accountability.
Yeah.
And now we're just expecting them to issue decisions that will be good for society when, one, they have no interest to do so, and two, the ideology, the ideological breakdown of the court is such that it's just not going to happen right now. And again, they're not accountable to anybody. They're unelected supreme rulers, high priests. They can do literally whatever they want. They have too much power.
Like, all of them are like that too. Even the liberal justices signed on to a document saying that they should not have more oversight to the Supreme Court. They all kind of suck.
Yeah. The Supreme Court is fundamentally broken at this point.
It's bad. And it's like, hey,
we got to get rid of it.
They have no mechanisms for enforcement. So if we all collectively just came through and said, no.
Yeah, they have no mega. I mean, like if we want to just be like, we're not doing this.
What if Joe Biden just said no?
Right. Like just totally ignored them. It's ridiculous. The Supreme Court is totally out of whack. And honestly, that's why I think like there's a lot of ideas for reform for the court right now that I think are like generally good. You got term limits, you got the option of trying to pack the court because there's no constitutional reason it's got to be limited to 9. There's some other idea, oversight requirements for some Supreme Court justices.
Elections just straight up like we do for every other judgeship.
There's a lot of ideas for the Supreme Court right now, but honestly, I feel like they're just it's a fundamentally broken institution that while some reforms might help, because it depends so much on the ideology of the justices, there is no means of ensuring that the decisions they offer will be good from here on out.
Yeah.
Because there are of course good Supreme Court decisions. The Brown v. Board of Education, desegregated schools, very important decision. There's been tons of others that
what was Roe v. Wade?
Right, exactly. But there are many, many more. Those are the exceptions. There are many, many more cases that are just terrible for people and have been terrible throughout history. Of course, Supreme Court held up child labor laws when different states were trying to pass those. They only legalized gay marriage in 2014 or 2015. So my problem is that while these reforms, these more like liberal-esque reforms would be good, and I'd be in support of those, the institution itself is predicated, or I get maybe more accurately, biased towards producing bad decisions because it has no incentive to, move society forward because there's no real accountability to the general population. And so they're only going to issue rulings that reinforce the current hierarchy. And that's what we've seen throughout all of history. They've reinforced racial hierarchy until they were forced to do otherwise. They've reinforced economic hierarchy and still do to this day. Like they have no incentive to act otherwise.
Harmful status quos.
Yeah.
It's really just all that's been going on,
especially when you consider
landmark rulings.
Especially when you consider the fact that like Clarence Thomas, Alito, and probably the rest of them are all bought off by business interests. That's not a method of political power that is available for everyone else to exercise. We functionally don't have a democracy as long as these people can do what is basically legislating, even though they shouldn't have the power to do that. They were meant to be the weakest branch of the government, and now they're the most powerful. If they can just say anything Biden does or anything the legislature does is unconstitutional, what's the point? It's all theatrics.
Just based on their own individual interpretations with absolutely no oversight whatsoever. Never just being appointed, never being elected, not having any accountability.
Yeah, especially like because Amy Coney Barrett, Neil Gorsuch, and Brett Kavanaugh are going to be there for like the next 40 years, right? Like they're young people, relatively speaking, at the very least.
They have more power than really like anyone else in government,
right? And that's not supposed to be the case. You would think that the people in a representative democracy, the people that have the most power are the ones that are the closest in terms of elections to the general population, because it's supposed to be a democracy. But I feel like the legislature is the weakest branch at this point. They can't do anything. And even if they do pass a law, the Supreme Court can just say, nope, that's unconstitutional.
Or they can base it all on a hypothetical.
Or even if we go state by state, right? Like Colorado had a state law, non-discrimination law in the last case that we just talked about, and they ruled that unconstitutional. You can't do that either. Like it doesn't matter. They will do whatever they can to reinforce the power that exists in society. We cannot allow them. They don't deserve to exist anymore.
So it's like I don't understand why we're so reluctant to go back and just radically reorganize the court and just term limits, have elections. We do it for state Supreme Courts, and nobody cares. Nobody looks at state Supreme Court elections and says, well, that's they're technically apolitical races, but that's as far as you get. Everybody votes on ideological lines. Anyway, everybody goes and looks up, who's the Republican, who's the Democrat, and fucking figures it out.
What I would like to see is he's not going to do this, but I think Biden should come out and Democrats should come out and say the Supreme Court needs to be stripped of their judicial review power. They should not be able to declare things unconstitutional. They should be giving us advice, suggestions. They should be looking at the documents and telling us what they think, and that's where their power should end. That is how other countries do it. Other countries don't even know who their Supreme Court justices are because they matter so little. What they should be doing is saying like, hey, this does violate the Constitution, and then the people that are elected can decide where to go from there. Otherwise, it's just not a democracy.
As long as they stay an unelected body that just gets to do whatever. Because what's been happening is they've just been legislating from the bench. They've just been having whatever laws that they want come through. I remember, what was it? Was it during Ketanji Brown Jackson's appointments? There was so much discourse about like judicial activism and this person's a judicial activist. They all are. Every single one of them is. Your most moderate justice is still a fucking judicial activist because they have the power to legislate from the bench and override really anything that the legislature does, which ideally, theoretically, is this democratic body that's beholden to the people and represents the will of the people, although we know that it doesn't most of the time.
Right. But like in that theoretical sense, even if it was the case that, gerrymandering wasn't an issue, voter suppression wasn't an issue, you still have a Supreme Court that people are saying has gone rogue, which I would argue is just built to be that way. They are built to stop progress from happening. That's what they have always existed for. FDR ran into this problem in the 1930s when he threatened to pack the court himself. Other presidents have ran into this issue. Abe Lincoln recognized it was an issue. This has been a problem for like all of the United States history, and they should be stripped of their power.
I don't know. I feel like there's also an issue with just how quickly the court can change things. Because the check on the court from the legislature is that, okay, the court says something's unconstitutional, or the legislature can just pass a law and make it so, and then everything's good. But it takes so much longer for the legislature to get anything done with the two chambers, elections every 2 years in the House, every 4 years in the Senate, constantly changing bodies. It takes so much longer to get any radical change done there. But the judges can just come through and just strip rights away from people overnight.
And what's crazy to me is that the Supreme Court justices are subject to less accountability and oversight than regular federal justices are. Like people sitting in federal courts or appellate courts are subject to, not a ton, albeit, but more oversight than any Supreme Court justices. Like these people are not high priest. Well, right now they basically are high priest, supreme overlord, God rulers, but they shouldn't be, right? Like why should they have so much more power than the people that we elect to govern us? It's not a system of self-rule if these people can basically act like tyrants, but hide behind the facade that the institution still has any amount of integrity.
It's such a fundamentally absurd thing, and we're just at a strictly absurd point right now. It's so goofy. The court is so fucking goofy.
We gonna have to bleep that one out.
I was about to say.
That's getting bleeped out. Don't worry, guys.
Just throw a beep.
Anyway, back to the student debt case. The standing issues here are equally as crazy as before because Republican states, what they did, it was Nebraska and somewhere else. They sued on behalf of Mohela, which is like a student loans servicing group out of Missouri that Missouri created. And Mohela themselves said, "I'm fine with this. Like, we're not losing money. There's no damage here."
Didn't Mohela come out and say that, or it was either them or it was another student loan financier or whatever, came out and said, actually, this is going to cost us more money because we're going to have to pay more in going after people who don't pay their
the
stuff
litigation?
Back. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or there was something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So they had no problem with this, but Republican states, which didn't have standing because, again, the groups that would have been hurt were saying we're not going to be hurt. But Republican states did the litigation anyway, and somehow, again, it got up to the Supreme Court, despite having no standing, no established reason for being there.
Both this and the last case just should have been thrown out. Like, they never should have gotten to the court in general.
It's an absolute joke that these were taken up at all. And the only reason that I can imagine that they were taken up is, again, to aid in the culture war that Republicans are waging against, like, everything good.
Because, like, how can it not be? How can it not be? You literally have justices coming out and admitting that they're fucking going on these lavish vacations from Republican donors, and you're gonna tell me that they're not gonna, like, listen in? They're not gonna take anything. They're not gonna want to go on another vacation, and to do that, they're not gonna want to make their friend happy.
Right, exactly. And now, before we get on to what Biden is planning to do, I want to end on a quote from John Roberts.
Okay.
He left us with
a
very important sentiment that I think we should pay attention to.
I think we all need to remember.
Yeah, keep this in mind, you dirty liberals, you fucking radicals.
It's fucking no respect for our institutions.
After issuing all of these god-awful Supreme Court decisions, the Chief Justice, John Roberts, said, quote, "It has become a disturbing feature of some recent opinions to criticize the decisions with which they disagree as going beyond the proper role of the judiciary." So what he's saying is, guys, please stop criticizing us.
Guys,
we're infallible.
You don't get it. Only 9 people can have opinions on these things.
Yeah.
and whatever the majority one is, that's the right one.
The fucking audacity this guy has after ensuring that I am indebted tens of thousands of dollars to tell me to not criticize him. What are you doing?
Now I personally want to just criticize you more. Now I just want to dig up dirt.
The audacity he has to side with justices that are saying, like, yeah, it's okay to discriminate against the LGBTQ. The audacity he has to say, don't criticize me for that is absolutely insane.
It's crazy. Clearly he can't take the heat. Like, he's got to be insecure.
Oh, yeah,
like, that's
sure.
100% where that comes from. He's like, no, guys, come on. Like, guys,
well, think about it, right? Like, he's allowing several of his members at this point to just get away with corruption. He's done literally nothing about Sam Alito and Clarence Thomas being bribed for certain decisions.
Refusing to recuse themselves from certain cases.
He can definitely see that the Supreme Court is taking a ton of heat. Bro is scared.
He's 100%
he's scared.
Like, fuck, come on.
And the only thing he can do to respond to all of the societal anger is to say, guys, please stop criticizing us. Fuck off.
No, guys, you don't have a... it's actually like a way overreach for you guys to also have an opinion on this. Oh, wait. Yeah, I get that you guys are political bodies and you kind of have to address concerns of the people, but, like, you can't... No, it's inappropriate for you to comment on our decisions.
You wouldn't understand. Did you go to Harvard? Did you go to Yale?
Yeah.
Didn't think so.
Did you go to Harvard Law?
Yeah, exactly.
Did you clerk somewhere and that's how you got into here, huh? Did your parents have money?
Yeah.
It's ridiculous that we have to be saddled with debt when Brett Kavanaugh got his fucking gambling debt excused. Mysteriously. It just went away.
And the PPP loans, of course. Didn't even talk about that. Nobody cares about that. That was an act of Congress, so it was a little different, but still. The point stands that nobody cares when people that are rich people, millionaires,
when
billionaires,
privileged people get their loans forgiven, and nobody bats an eye. But when I don't have to pay my loans anymore, then fucking everybody freaks out.
When I don't got to pay $250 extra a month, that like life-saving amount of money. People lose their fucking mind.
When if it wasn't for the pod, I wouldn't have extra income every month. Like.
So if you want to make sure Gage stays alive, head over to patreon.com/InTheOfficePod. Before we leave the topic of student debt, though, Biden did announce his new student loan forgiveness plan that he is pursuing. He had a press conference pretty shortly after this decision dropped, I think like the same day, like 11 o'clock or something like that Eastern time. It's unclear exactly what it's going to be, but I think you got some details on it in here.
I don't have details necessarily about what he wants to do with the Higher Education Act. Right. All that he's really said about that is that, okay, there's this plan that we can pursue under the Higher Education Act where we can forgive loans based on like a specific review process within the Department of Education, but it's going to take a little bit longer, but we're trying to figure it out, and we want to exhaust every avenue that we can to get this forgiveness through. Right. Which I was kind of surprised that he like came out so quick about, but it does make a lot of sense considering that this is one of the things that really I feel like got him the midterms. Yeah. It's the kind of a huge messaging point, but he did say in the meantime that he wants to he is creating a 12-month on-ramp program that will ensure that borrowers who are struggling to make their student loan payments once payments restart in October, because can't forget that the payment pause is ending.
Debt ceiling negotiations got you that one.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. That those people won't default if they can't make their payments. So it seems like they're just kind of giving us a 12-month buffer period to adjust to having, I don't know, a couple extra $100 tacked onto your monthly bills that you're already struggling with.
Right, exactly.
To, I guess, like reorganize your finances and figure things out, and you won't default for missing payments under this 12-month period. And they're going to enforce that by making it so that the Department of Education won't refer borrowers who miss payments to credit agencies.
Yeah, okay.
So that's pretty cool, but it's like, if you can do that, why not just like do that forever?
Yeah, I was kind of thinking like, why not make the buffer period infinite?
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
Like if you can just kind of make it like, if you can just say the Department of Education is no longer going to pursue or no longer refer you to credit agencies if you miss your payments, why not just like continue?
I think it's because there was some stipulation in the debt ceiling agreement that said that he was going to restart payments in October. But I guess, like if he can do this, why not just do it forever?
Yeah. Executive order, blah, 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 do it forever. And then the next guy comes in and they're like, we're taking this away and you got to pay all your loans back. And everyone's like, what?
Yeah, so there's two things I want to address before we move on. And it's coming from people that are like leftists that I think are making bad critiques of what's going on here.
Okay.
First thing, a lot of people have been hating on Biden for what happened here. And I get it, like the frustration with him. He said he was going to forgive student loans, but I don't really see what else he could have done in this situation.
I think
the Supreme Court has far too much power.
Yeah.
And Biden isn't a tyrant. They are the tyrants. He isn't a tyrant. He can't just decide things and then it happens. It's not really how our government works.
And it's also like, I think the genuine critique when it comes to that, I think there was a legislative, there was things that they could have done back when they had the majority to try to ensure this. And there were, I think, different ways they could have explored the avenue. But that's criticism for then. Everything's kind of been, that's in the past now.
Right, yeah.
I still criticize him for it, yeah.
Sure.
But to come now and say it, it's just kind of like, I guess we're going to try a different avenue.
Well, and there were some people saying that he should have unleashed this new idea that he wants to do, this new program. He should have done that initially as well. But I think, at least from my position, that he was probably waiting to see what SCOTUS would do so that they couldn't invalidate both at the same time.
They were definitely anticipating litigation.
Right. So he didn't want to like get both clocked at the same time, or his administration didn't want to get both clocked at the same time. Then he would have had no avenue to pursue whatsoever. I don't know if that's what they were thinking, but to me, that's what it seems like. And ultimately, it's just like Biden, I don't know what would you wanted him to do in this situation? I guess just like cancel it anyway.
Because it's like,
I mean, that's fine too.
Part of it would have been he needed to work with the legislature, like both chambers, to get things done that he could have done back when we had like majorities in both places. And I don't think that was going to pan out anyway, because Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema, they never would have agreed.
Yeah.
There's like a bunch of things that were happening. And I don't know. It feels like student loans are really the only thing that Biden campaigned on that he actually like wants to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like maybe. It seems like this is like kind of like the one issue that he's actually like in on.
Yeah.
So like that's cool at least.
And the other thing, if you remember, I said two things.
Yes.
The other thing I wanted to bring up is that there's so many leftists saying like, this is why you shouldn't vote, or like, you really think I'm going to vote after this? Like Biden promised he's not getting it done. Motherfucker. But
it's like an unelected body did this.
An unelected body did this, and the reason they're there is because
you didn't
an election
vote in 2016.
Like, come on, like we've been through this so many times. The exact like I've seen so many people like, this is happening under a Democratic administration. Like, you really think I'm going to vote for Democrats again? Like I know
you're stupid.
They suck, but at least they're trying something, and they're not literally saying, yeah, discriminating against gay people is cool, go ahead and do it.
It's like, so you would rather just sit idly by while the conservative comes through.
Right.
You are abstaining from the trolley problem.
I swear.
Like, you are coming across the train tracks and saying, well, if I don't touch the lever, none of this is my fault.
It's like, you see, this kind of critique just allows conservatives to get away with anything. They're very clearly the evil person here. They're the wrongdoer here, and you're criticizing the people that weren't responsible for this happening in the first place.
That are trying to clean it up, albeit not trying guess their hardest.
They suck.
Like they're not doing it the best that they can. I can assure you that. But at least they're trying a little bit.
Right.
And you need to work at local levels from the bottom up when it comes to getting these more progressive people in. But at the level of the federal government, we got a limited list of people we can work with. And you kind of got to work with
unless
them.
you're going to start the revolution. And because if you're not, then we got to like do what we can do inside the parameters of what we got right now. And the only thing, like, because like who's the one passing anti-trans laws right now? Who's the one passing anti-LGBTQ laws? Who's the one, doing book bans, all this kind of stuff?
Who are the ones threatening to literally eliminate trans people from existence with gender affirming care bans?
Exactly.
And who are the ones saying, no, guys, we shouldn't do that. I'm going to try to do student loans.
Yeah.
Like, there's a clear winner.
Like, obviously, Democrats, awful party. I hate them. I wish I didn't have to vote for them.
Yeah.
But in the system we got right now, the shitty two-party system, there is one side that wants to make everything worse, and there's one side that, for the most part, doesn't.
God, that is such an awful take because, like, they're just eating they're being fed the conservative talking points. Because I've seen a bunch of conservatives on Twitter talking about, well, Biden tricked all these voters with promises of student debt. He bought your votes with promises of student debt, and look, he couldn't deliver. It's like, why couldn't he deliver?
So
Let's think about that.
Are you either, the only alternative there is either you don't vote for anybody, which again hands Republicans the election, or you vote for the Republican who wants
you more debt,
who wants you
higher
to pay
interest
more,
rates.
You're going to vote for a person in the party that tried to retroactively apply interest to your student loans. I'm not kidding. They tried to do this. Like, what the fuck are we talking about? Like, the reason that they are in this position is because Trump won in 2016. That is indisputable.
We want higher interest rates. Like, come on.
It's the Simpsons meme. We're evil and we're going to make things worse. And people are cheering.
Do you want the people? God, dude. It's so fucking bad. It annoys me so much whenever I see people like, Biden bought your vote. It's like he's trying a little bit.
Yeah, and like it's never enough, of course. But like again, if you're not going to start the revolution, we got to do what we got to do.
Like, believe me, I'm pissed too. I got to start payments in October, just like the rest of us.
All right, exactly.
Fuck.
I think it's time to move on to our last major SCOTUS decision that we got, and that's affirmative action.
This feels like the big one.
That's it's definitely big, and that's the one that came out before the rest of them. I think a day before.
Yeah.
Last week, and it was really bad.
It was.
It's bad, guys.
I remember the moment I got the news. I was just fucking scrolling through TikTok, and a CBS like live came up on my TikTok and it said breaking news, and I was like, breaking news? What's going on? Affirmative action gutted. And I was like, oh, that's what we got going on this week. Okay.
And like again, this was expected, but all of the takes I've seen from conservatives on this one, like I tweeted this out, but we're on the are conservatives this fucking stupid or is it a grift cul-de-sac? Because like the takes they offer are just like pea brain. They're so stupid.
They're just lies, and unfortunately they're lies that have persisted for a really long time, like throughout just like American culture and these discussions that we'll obviously get into and dissect. You know what we do. You know what we do on this podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's just kind of a sad thing to see how normalized like all these lies and myths have been, and how we've just pitted two minority groups against each other.
Yeah.
When a white guy is the one who is responsible for bringing the case to the Supreme Court.
Fucking Edward Blum.
Like, this is another one.
Another demon person.
This is an insane just case.
Yeah.
It shouldn't have even got to the Supreme Court in general. Like, we'll get into it later, but there are rumors that he attended, like, dinners, and he's like, I need an Asian plaintiff.
That's so good.
Like,
that's so
like
good.
It was fully his intent to just
holy shit.
Take this Asian American narrative, capitalize on cultural myths that have been routinely perpetuated for the last couple of years, and then pit an Asian American against a black person. That's
perfect.
Come on.
Well, because if it was a white person they did, it would just be blatantly white supremacist, right?
Yeah.
Like it would just be on it explicit. But now they can claim plausible deniability.
Because when it's a white person going up, it's a white person saying, I want less black people here.
Precisely.
But then when they can put an Asian person up and I guess say the same fucking thing, they can be like, no, you're actually racist if you say that. That's
like,
what they're
look,
saying.
Liberals, you care about all people of color, right?
Liberals, how is it white supremacist to have an Asian say that they want less black people?
Yeah. Yeah. So, again, this is one of the first decisions we got in this cascade of bad news. The case was Fair Admissions, Inc., which, surprised, they don't really care about fair admissions.
Crazy.
The presidents and fellows of Harvard College, and I think UNC, University of North Carolina, was involved in this as well.
They were a part of it, yeah. I don't know to what extent, but I know they were a part of it.
But in another 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court outlawed race-conscious admissions in public universities across the nation, effectively ending all affirmative action policies in regards to admissions. And it's really not good. The majority opinion here was written by John Roberts, I'm guessing in an attempt to stop Clarence Thomas from like resegregating schools.
Going crazy.
Or just like not allowing black people to get into college ever again, probably. But it was written by John Roberts, and these race-conscious admissions were deemed unconstitutional under the 14th Amendment, which is the Equal Protection Amendment, if you don't know, which is ironic because the 14th Amendment was designed to disrupt racial hierarchy and attempt to end it, not to reinforce it, which is what it's being used for right now.
A part of easing a little bit of discrimination, like a part of easing discrimination is kind of like, I don't want to say discriminating in the other way, but that's kind of like the gist of it.
Well,
like offering more
bias
opportunity
in the other direction.
Exactly. Offering more opportunity to people who have historically been offered less to try and correct. Like, that's kind of what that's all about. And that's why it's the first time that the Equal Protection Clause has been used to like restrict rights for a marginalized group, to like get rid of practices that have helped them.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Malcolm X quote, which he said much better than I can recite. But it was something along the lines of, you stick a knife into my back 9 inches, then pull it out 6 inches. That doesn't resolve the problem. That's not healing me. If you take it all the way out, that still hasn't resolved the problem. You have to heal the wound, and that takes some active effort. You have to intentionally try. You have to do a variety of things, show bias towards the wound in order to heal it. And then we haven't done that for race in this country.
And like, in a way, affirmative action has been that Band-Aid. Like, it's not the perfect solution. When you get stabbed, you need a little bit more than a Band-Aid, but it has been a Band-Aid solution. It hasn't been the perfectest thing to ever come about. It hasn't been the greatest thing to come about, but it was a tool that was used and did some good, as we'll get into. Yeah.
Like, imagine you're at the start of a race, okay? Yep. And you get both of your legs cut off, and then they put you in like a wheelchair and say, all right, start racing. Right, that's basically what it is, right? Like, you're in a foot race and they cut your legs off. That's kind of what affirmative action was. But before we move on, there's a lot of misconceptions about how affirmative action actually worked. Yeah. And I want to try to clear this up a little bit. Okay. Because tell them. A lot of people just think like, oh, it's just like, diversity hires. That's really all it is. And that's wrong.
This person is black, so they can get in with a 1.0 GPA and a 900 SAT.
Into Harvard.
Into Harvard, yeah.
So I want to take a holistic approach. And before we get into it, affirmative action, not my favorite solution to this kind of stuff.
No.
It's not that great, but it's, again, a Band-Aid, better than nothing,
and it's like, empirically, we know that it's done good.
Yeah.
We'll get into it.
Yeah. So if we're taking a 10,000-foot view to start off, educational success, of course, is motivated usually by access to wealth and resources. You do better in school when you have access to the resources that help you learn more, right? Like, that's not a controversial take. We have tons of social science on this to back up that point. Now, of course, wealth in the United States is unevenly distributed based on race because of the historical effects of racism in this country. Black families significantly take in much less than white families do, and this is all because of, the effects of slavery, Jim Crow laws, black code laws, redlining, the war on drugs, over-policing. You get the point. There's been lots of systemic racism in this country that has created a lot of wealth disparities. It's nothing inherent to black people as a racial category. It's merely because we've discriminated against them in the past, which creates wealth disparities between these two groups. And on top of all of that, of course, public schools are funded based on property taxes. So if you live in poor neighborhoods, then you are going to be going to poorer schools, or vice versa. If you live in wealthier neighborhoods, you're going to go to wealthier schools, which have more resources, opportunities, etc. Now, college admissions are entirely based off of standardized measures. The problem with standardized measures, beyond like the what we may usually recognize as issues, but the core issue with standardized measures are that they assume equal conditions among everybody participating. Which, of course, we don't have if we have massive wealth disparities based on race in the United States. So on average, white kids on standardized measures will have an easier time getting into college just based on standardized measures alone than black students will. That's just like how it works out in college admissions.
Fact of the matter, like, there's a very clear line that you can see that ties these things to. And there have been studies that have shown that your SAT score is a better predictor of how much money your family has than it is how well you will do in college.
Precisely, yeah.
Because most standardized tests are already designed to be like, okay, you learn how to take this test. You kind of need to game the test. And when your school has the resources to dedicate, SAT prep classes, then clearly they're going to have higher average SAT scores than schools who do not.
Yeah.
When you have more time to buy, when you have more extra income to buy SAT prep books, you're going to do better on the SAT than those who didn't.
Yeah, all of this stems from wealth disparities in this country because black Americans have been intentionally, and not just black Americans, but all people of color in the United States, I guess, except for Asian students that are going to colleges.
Yeah.
But even them to some extent, like people of color in the United States have been systemically held back. And that creates disparities in college admissions unless you attempt to solve for it on the back end, which is what affirmative action was trying to do.
Especially when we know that SAT scores are not a measure of how well you do in college. When we know that, we can kind of say, okay, you know, maybe the SAT isn't the best objective metric to look at like what's going on and how well they're going to succeed. Maybe then you can look and take a holistic review like affirmative action attempts to do and say like, all right, this kid grew up in a little bit of a rougher area, a little bit of a poorer area, got like a 1350 on their SAT, right? That person, maybe it's a black kid, and then this other kid, white kid, grew up in an affluent area, got a 1400. Maybe that 1350 is going to be a little more impressive from someone who didn't have access to the resources that the other kid had.
Right. The idea is that kid had to work harder than the one from the wealthier area to get to that point. And if we want a merit-based system, which Republicans claim they want to have, then we would prioritize putting the one person into college that has worked harder throughout their life than the other one has. We wouldn't, because when they say they want a merit-based system, what they're saying is they want a money-based system. Absolutely. They want a system that prioritizes who has had wealth in society, because that is what's going to determine if you can get into college.
Meritocracy, more like moneytocracy. You know
we
what I'm
coined
saying?
that term here.
That's right. Don't you ever forget it. But it's also like that kid who grew up in a poor area with a 1350. It shows more of an aptitude for, I guess, learning when they can do that despite adverse conditions than just a 1400 in a regular like household. Nothing's really going on. Like you clearly had to work harder. You had to be a little bit smarter. You had to use your resources, the little resources that you were provided, better to get that.
Right. And by the way, affirmative action policies haven't only been for race admissions, right? Like white women have benefited from affirmative action more than any other group in the United States because there's been affirmative action policies to get more women into colleges because that was a compelling state interest as decided by state legislatures and the Congress. So like these policies have worked. They've been helpful to people. Is it a perfect solution? No. The real solution here is to resolve the core wealth disparity that is at the basis of the American economy. But barring that happening, there's got to be something that ensures fair outcomes for people in college admissions. And if we're not going to do that, then like people of color in the United States that have been deprived of wealth throughout our history just won't be able to participate.
It's essentially just affirmative action was a way for college admissions councils, admissions people to apply a little bit of intersectionality to their application review process. And we know that intersectionality is a bit of a good thing.
Yeah,
it's really just what it boils down to.
It's the truth. It's reality.
It's the truth,
right?
Yeah.
And I want to make it clear, okay? Affirmative action wasn't where, say, I don't know, a black student with a 2.5 GPA was getting into Harvard. Like that just wasn't the case.
No.
It was among quality applicants, quality based on whatever measures they're using for the college. Among those applicants, we're going to look at all of their characteristics and see who can get in. Nobody that was undeserving was getting in to, say, Harvard or Yale or something.
Just because they were black.
Except for the white kids who are legacy admissions that merely get in because their parents donated a wing of a library.
It's either, I can't remember the statistic exactly. It's the one we were talking about before.
Yeah.
It's either 50% of legacy admits at Harvard are white, or 50% of white kids at Harvard are legacy admits.
Right.
Either way you spin it, that's crazy. Who's not deserving there?
Right.
The kid who maybe got a little bit lower than the average SAT score and average GPA that Harvard accepts, or the kid who just got in because daddy went there.
Precisely. Yeah. No, exactly. It's like, and of course, the Supreme Court ruling doesn't touch legacy admissions.
Aren't there explicit
whatsoever.
carve-outs like saying that legacy is okay?
I don't even know if they touched it at all.
Okay.
But they definitely didn't get rid of them.
Yeah.
And I also want to note that this Supreme Court decision, if you don't know, in military institutions, military schools, affirmative action policies apply because they are generally helpful in recruiting people. And the Supreme Court said the military can continue to do affirmative action policies.
Because it's good.
Yeah.
Like because it's
provides,
good, it helps us out. It's better for like our generalship.
Because it would completely kneecap the military and its operational capacity if we eliminated these policies, because we recognize that affirmative action policies are good. That diversity of background among the people that are in your institution is a good thing. It is a compelling interest. It is something you should pursue. It creates a good environment for everybody and for the outcomes that your community will be able to get.
I just fundamentally don't understand how a carve-out can possibly exist for military academies.
I thought it was racist. I thought affirmative action was racist.
It's not even just I thought it was racist. Isn't it just like if this is a policy that is unconstitutional, we are ruling this policy in of itself as unconstitutional, a violation
Under the 14th
of equal
Amendment,
protection.
yeah.
but not in this case.
Right.
Yeah, but over there it's fine.
Yeah, I thought it was this vile, racist set of policies that made it unfair for everybody. That made it so we weren't. If you wanted merit-based solutions, shouldn't the first place you look to be the military, the group that protects our country? Shouldn't you want them to be the one? Shouldn't you want the top dogs to be there?
Yeah.
Above anywhere else?
Yeah, I don't want I don't want diversity hires in the military. Right. Just losing us wars.
It goes to show you that this is
unserious.
Totally unserious. Yeah, because my thought when I saw that the military isn't the restriction of affirmative action policies or at least race-based admissions aren't being restricted for the military, my thought is like, okay, John Roberts, at least John Roberts, because he wrote the majority opinion, recognizes that affirmative action has been good. And he recognizes that he wants to stay on like the right-wing grift train, so he's got to get rid of it for universities.
Yeah, he wants to go on another vacation.
But if he applied that also to the military, he knows that affirmative action works, and it would destroy what we got going on there. I think he recognizes this, and he's just evil.
But it's like, did he not just make an unconstitutional carve-out?
Right.
Or it's like a justice's word, just law.
But right, that's the thing, is like whatever they say is inevitable. There's no right and wrong.
Can you not challenge affirmative action in military academies because it was carved out? Like, you not challenge it on the basis that affirmative action is unconstitutional now because it was like carved out of this one time?
I guess
even though affirmative action is technically ruled unconstitutional?
Right.
Come on.
Ridiculous. So,
unserious.
As we already mentioned, the Supreme Court here, this case that came before the Supreme Court, it put Asian students in the forefront, arguing that, Asian students are being denied admissions because of affirmative action. Like, the subtext is because of black students, but it's generally people of color. But side note, there was one Asian student several years ago that kind of helped kick this all off and had a problem with affirmative action policies.
Was it the one who was like, yeah, I graduated with a 4.3 GPA and a 1590 SAT score, and Harvard didn't accept me?
I think he was a guy like that.
Okay.
I don't know if he was the one that you're thinking of, but he was, along similar lines. But he recently admitted back in May that the true issue here is systemic racism. I'm glad that you just took the entire country on your own personal journey of self-actualization. I'm glad you came to the right answer after dooming everybody else. Thanks for that. That's pretty cool.
That's so good, dude. That's so good. No, I had seen a video. I had thought it was, there are two affirmative action cases that are here at this term. I don't know if both got ruled into this one decision or if the other one's going to be litigated on separate terms and doubly affirm that affirmative action is bad. But
actually, black students are just not allowed in college.
You can't go. Yeah. Actually, you're only HBCUs for you.
Right.
But maybe I had seen something where this Asian kid was complaining about, I had a 4.3 or a 4.6 GPA and a 1590 SAT, and I didn't get into Harvard, so that means it's unfair. Does it?
Yeah.
Everyone who applies to Harvard has fucking above 4.0 and better SAT scores than you.
I was about to say, like, what's Harvard acceptance rate? Like 0.1%?
Yeah.
Like nobody gets in.
And it's like there are also strictly better applicants than you applying.
Well, and that's my whole problem here, right? Is that Republicans, conservatives, they want to base their rejection of affirmative action policies around this idea that the world or the United States should be a meritocracy, right? Everything that you get should be something that you worked for. If you don't have the merit, you shouldn't be able to get it, right? Like, that's the idea that they're pushing. But my problem is, like, affirmative action didn't work like that. If you didn't get in, you weren't good enough.
Yeah.
Like this is the type of shit that if a liberal was like, oh, I met all the requirements, I should have got it, you would call them a snowflake for crying about it. It would have been like, work harder, be better. But now because it serves your ideology, you're like, oh yeah, this totally isn't fair. I am totally in support of helping Asian people.
Well, it's crazy how you can simultaneously hold the same opinion that, like, oh yeah, this Asian like totally deserved to get in, but this black person needs to work harder.
Yeah, right. Ridiculous.
Like all things like that, the Asian wants to discriminate against one.
You got to point out the dichotomy here. Discrimination in college admissions, very bad. Discrimination for businesses,
super
very good.
Actually, really cool and constitutional.
Back to back. Back to back.
Like the two days.
Yeah.
One day, the other. God damn.
Discrimination good, discrimination bad.
So fucking ridiculous. But it's also got me wondering, like, how is this going to be enforced?
That's a good point, yeah.
Like, I genuinely don't understand because, like, in the majority opinion, Gorsuch said, like, you can still tick the race box on your admission. Yeah. John Roberts said you can still tick the race box on your application.
Yep.
And you can still write essays about your experience with your race.
And that will be taken into consideration, yeah.
Taken into consideration by admissions committees. Is that not just like affirmative action?
Right. And that's exactly why I think that he recognizes affirmative action is a thing that has helped progress American society.
Yeah.
And so I think he wants to allow it to exist, yet aid in the culture war, because he knows if he does otherwise, like he's the last thinking conservative, right? Like he's literally self-conscious, like he's aware of his own existence.
Strategic conservative.
Like he recognizes if he gets rid of this, then it will be really damaging for the economy, for people as a whole, for the country, for the military, or again along same lines. But he has to serve in this kind of right-wing grift. Otherwise, like if he voted against it, again, Clarence Thomas resegregates the schools, right? Like,
well, because it's like we know that ending affirmative action is bad. California 25 years ago banned affirmative action with Prop 209, right? And in California, the ban on affirmative action, this is from Los Angeles Times, the ban on affirmative action at public universities imposed more than 25 years ago had little positive impact for Asian Americans. Asian Americans, because this whole thing is predicated on Asian Americans are being discriminated against because of like race quotas. Like, oh, they're filling up the Asian spots, so now we have to let in underqualified black people because we've already filled the Asian spots, so you can't get in. But ending affirmative action had little positive impact on Asian Americans. Asian Americans and white students may have been marginally more likely to get into their first choice of college versus their second choice after the ban, but overall access to the top tier of UC campuses, University of California campuses, was unchanged, as were economic outcomes. The ban, however, had major negative impacts on Black and Latino students. Enrollment at the most prestigious campuses drove down their applications to the UC system overall and dramatically decreased earnings over time. It didn't do anything for Asian Americans. It did nothing for white Americans. It only hurt Black and brown Americans.
Which is like the key here, right? We have empirical data in a state, in the largest state in the country. We know what's going to happen nationwide if there is some kind of enforcement mechanism here.
I don't fucking get it. And that's extrapolated from this UC Berkeley study. And I'm going to read a little bit from the abstract that was published a while ago. Ending affirmative action caused UC's 10,000 annual underrepresented minority freshman applicants to cascade into lower quality public and private universities. URM applicants' undergraduate and graduate degree attainment declined overall and in STEM fields, especially among lower testing applicants. As a result, the average URM UC applicant wages declined by 5% annually between ages 24 and 34, almost wholly driven by decline among Hispanic applicants. By the mid-2010s, Prop 209 had caused a cumulative decline in the number of early career URM Californians earning over $100,000 by at least 3%. It also deterred thousands of qualified people who fit into the underrepresented minority category from applying because of like the stereotype threat, because they know they're not going to get in. Like they feel like they're not going to get in because they're like, oh, ending affirmative action. So why am I even going to try? And that caused further negative harm. And I want to emphasize that nothing was better for Asians or white Americans. It was only worse for Black and Hispanic Americans. It happened. We did it 25 years ago, and we can see the outcomes. We can look at them. We understand what's going on. And we're just going to do that today, but like across the whole country?
It's so glaringly obvious what the point of this conquest is. It is to hurt Black Americans in this country, and I guess Latinx Americans as well. Like, it's only to hurt people. That's it.
And it's like University of Michigan studies have also shown that affirmative action programs increase Asian applicants' chances of getting in. Crazy. I can link to the LA Times article that links to all these stories, and you can fucking see it for yourself. Oh my God.
I did love that there's a complete just misunderstanding of statistics nowadays. They as soon as this affirmative action case came out, there were conservatives tweeting this screenshot of some study that was a part of the case, where it showed like the 10th highest tier, like or like the highest tier of
top
people that applied
decile.
to Harvard, top decile, and it was like 50% of the top 10, the top decile for Black students got in, while it was only like 13% for white students, and it's like there's less Black applicants. There's less Black people in the country. So, of course, the proportion's going to be higher. Like, it's just a fundamental misunderstanding of how numbers work that people just cannot grasp. It's so good.
And it's also crazy because I have seen some people try to like, people have like pointed out what we're obviously pointing out, and people have tried to clap back at that by saying, I think in that same study, it says that African-American students in the 4th highest decile or the 4th decile are more likely than Asian Americans in the top decile to get in. But it's also because we're considering intersectionality. We're not just looking at test scores, which is all that study did. That study was analyzing based on these test scores and your race, how likely are you to get in. It took no intersectional approach. And that's why we see that result.
Right.
And as we understand from these studies and what happened when Prop 209 passed and we banned it in California, it was worse off for pretty much everybody.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't better for anybody. Only worse.
Yeah.
Only worse.
We know what's going to happen. We know why affirmative action began in the first place. These people just want to make the country a worse place to be, and they just want to hurt people of color. That's it.
It's also so crazy that conservatives can stake this all on like Asian Americans, and it's just white people that are like, oh yeah, that's unfair for Asians, because most Asians support affirmative action. We have polling that tells us this. Most Asians think that, that's okay and cool.
Yeah,
it's
like
just the whiny ones.
They're literally one step away from just saying, I don't want black people at universities anymore.
Yeah.
Like, that's it.
It's so crazy how just like entitled wealthy people are, so because class is more unifying than race. I swear to God.
Yeah.
Entitled wealthy kids will be so quick to fucking tokenize themselves in order to take away rights, or not even rights, take away access to institutions from other minorities that they, I guess, implicitly deem as lesser, so that they can maybe have a better chance, even though oh my God, bro, it's so ridiculous.
It's like, no, I actually am the model minority.
Yeah,
I swear.
you don't get it, guys. Come on, it's not a myth. It's me.
So just like last time, I think we should end on some quotes from our favorite justices.
I think so too.
Roberts, in the majority opinion, wrote, quote, many universities for too long concluded wrongly that the touchstone of an individual's identity is not challenges bested, skills built, or lessons learned, but the color of their skin. Our constitutional history does not tolerate that choice. Again, really fucking stupid, because that is the history of the United States, is that what you get to do is wholly based on your skin color.
And
just some revisionism for you.
Your race quite literally informs who you are. It informs how you are socialized in this country. Like,
not inherently, but just because people are racist.
It's a process of socialization. Institutional racism, systemic racism puts that onto you. Stereotype threat forces you into these boxes. It's a part of your identity. You can't separate yourself from it, no matter how much some people seem to try to, like Clarence Thomas in affirmative action hire himself.
Yeah, no, literally. It is true, by the way. Oh my God. Speaking of Thomas, though, he wrote in a concurring opinion, quote, while I am painfully aware of the social and economic ravages which have befallen my race and all who suffer discrimination, I hold our enduring hope that this country will live up to its principles that all men are created equal, are equal citizens, and must be treated equally before the law. Again, just history revision.
Something that we failed to live up to.
Oh yeah, why have we failed to live up to it this far? Right?
Yeah.
And he also, Thomas went on like a tirade about how the Supreme Court was the one to end school segregation with Brown v. Board, and it's like, dog, the Supreme Court was also the one to legalize discrimination in Plessy v. Ferguson. We got this in the abortion ruling last time around too. I think it was the abortion ruling where he said like, oh yeah, the Supreme Court was the one to strike down Plessy v. Ferguson, like, so we can strike down egregious decisions like Roe versus Wade. It's like, no, the Supreme Court is just wrong most of the time.
Yeah, no,
that's
really,
the problem here.
Sometimes they're right. Sometimes they come through with a good thing, but most of the time they tell you that, yeah, you can still be executed if you're innocent.
Right, yeah. And in a dissenting opinion, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, she wrote, with let them eat cake obliviousness today, the majority pulls the ripcord and announces colorblindness for all by legal fiat, but deeming race irrelevant in law does not make it so in life. And of course, this is correct. Correct take.
I know she talked a lot about colorblindness, I think, right? And which is just right.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, colorblind policies don't work because there's a racial history that informs, who you are and how you're socialized and what goes on.
Unfortunately,
and how other people view you.
Yeah.
God.
Her dissent was good, but of course the dissents literally don't matter when it comes to case law. So I just that's why we haven't been reading any of them on the show.
Majority opinion is the only thing that really matters.
Which is kind of why I think Roberts wrote a lot of these majority opinions, because like Clarence Thomas, Sam Alito were probably going to destroy the country with their opinions.
I can imagine they got to know. They got to give Clarence the easy ones, the layups kind of, where you can't really veer off and be like, oh my God, segregate the schools.
Because I know Clarence Thomas wanted to write the affirmative action one. It's pretty obvious with this 58-page concurring opinion that he wrote. Like, he wanted to set the case law there. He wanted to set precedent, but they didn't let him. Which is I guess it's good, but in the grand scheme of things, bad either way. Yeah.
It's crazy. It's crazy because I think there was a bit in a Clarence Thomas documentary where they were talking about how he was I think he was one of 12 black students in his class at Yale, and he was constantly called a diversity admittant or something like that, and he was really insecure about it. And it's okay, Clarence, but that's more of a condemnation on them for misunderstanding you in general and the acceptance system, and less of a condemnation on how you didn't deserve to be there because clearly you did.
Right, exactly.
like
well, would you have rather not gone to Yale? I guess is like and it's like, of course, like you shouldn't just assume like, oh, you must be an affirmative action applicant if you got into this institution. That's a racist thing to do. But again, yeah, it's on them for saying that to you.
It's like, why are you taking the blame away from them who clearly like cut you deep? And then putting it on the law that got you where you are as one of the most powerful people. I don't even want to say got you where you are, because like the thing about affirmative action is that it doesn't put unqualified candidates where they're not supposed to be. Like, you were qualified. You probably just might have been overlooked if these things weren't taken into consideration.
Right.
So it's already a weird discussion to be having.
Because people were racist and people are racist.
Exactly. Like, that's what it is.
It's crazy from Clarence Thomas, especially because bro grew up in the segregated South.
Oh, and he talked about it. He talked about it in his concurring opinion.
Yeah, like he knows. And I don't know. He's just
it's like he took all the wrong lessons away from it and is making it everyone else's problem.
Again, yeah, like his individual personal journey on this is everyone else's
He put
fault.
the blame everywhere it like shouldn't have been.
Yeah.
God.
I think that sums up all the major Supreme Court cases we had to talk about today. If you're wondering about Moore v. Harper, the one that was potentially going to end democracy as we know it.
Yeah, like if that would have went the wrong way,
it'd be over.
That'd be the whole episode. Like,
yeah,
like that'd be like that overshadowed literally everything else.
Democracy's not over though. I think what happened is they just dismissed it and referred back to, was it North Carolina Supreme Court, whatever the state Supreme Court was. Yeah. So this got sent back in a 6-3 decision. I think with Kavanaugh and Barrett switching to the liberal side.
Not Clarence.
Never Clarence Thomas. Never Sam Alito. Always on the wrong side of history. Those two. So yeah, that didn't happen. But I think that summarizes our hate speech against the Supreme Court today.
Real, yeah. So democracy didn't end. It feels like we had to trade every other decision just to get the good Moore v. Harper decision.
Yeah.
You know,
it was tough. Really bad session from the Supreme Court. We did get the gerrymandering decision, which was like fine.
That's true.
What I mean?
I know there was a smaller decision that came. It wasn't even a decision. I think they just chose to not take up the case and kick it back to lower courts that effectively reaffirmed. Ironically, I guess, reaffirmed status of trans people as like a protected class under the ADA and because of something to do with gender dysphoria.
Supreme Court's gone woke.
So that was like low key a win.
Yeah.
So that's cool. But then they just said, but you can't discriminate against them in another decision.
Yeah.
So I don't want to make a website celebrating trans identity.
So this is not what we're going to deal with. You go ahead and do it though.
Exactly.
Like, we have no part in that. Pretty
We
cool.
already did our thing like over here.
So that wraps up our coverage of SCOTUS and our episode for today. But before we go, of course, we got a special interview with a member of a union out of the University of Michigan. So I hope you guys enjoy. We're now happy to welcome to the show Meg Burt, a member of the Graduate Employees Organization Labor Union at the University of Michigan. Meg, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, it's great to be on. As you said, my name is Meg Burt. I use she and they pronouns, and I am a PhD candidate in political science at the University of Michigan. I'm also a proud member of the Graduate Employees Organization, Local 3550.
Great. So we asked you to come on today to share where your union is at in the current strike in Ann Arbor against the University of Michigan. Can you just start off by giving us a bird's eye view as to what's happening, how long you've been on strike, and the progress of the strike as of right now?
Right. So we've been on strike since the end of March. We walked out, I believe, March 24th. And the progress has basically been that we've made a lot of progress at the bargaining table on certain issues. So our most recent wins have been, we've made some progress on, guaranteed abortion access, which was a great win for us. Nice. We've made some progress on certain aspects of trans healthcare for our members, for graduate workers at the University of Michigan, which is a really big issue for us, which is something that we really want. We want all trans grad workers at the University of Michigan to have both on paper and in practice access to healthcare, which is really what has been the struggle for trans workers at the University of Michigan. So those have been some things that we've been making a lot of progress in. So things that we've been struggling with mostly has been compensation. That's been the biggest thing that we've been struggling with. We are still pretty much very far apart on compensation. We maintain that we need a modest cost of living adjustment. We want to be able to afford to live in the city that we work in. We don't think that that's a very big ask. What we're asking for is a baseline living wage of $38,000. That number didn't come from nowhere. That is the calculated living wage for Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is where we work. It's not a salary that anyone's going to get rich on, but it is the amount that you need to live in that area.
Right.
That is all we want, is to be able to live where we work. The university has told us that it is not their policy to consider the cost of living when determining salary. They've told that to us. They've told us to other unions that they're negotiating with as well. So that they've negotiated with as well. So so their offer, actually their first year offer of the contract, has not moved since we've been on strike. They're still at 5%. They have made some movements for years 2 and 3 of the contract. They've moved 0.5% for years 2 and 3. That's about, at our salary, that's $10 a month. So the only movement that they've made is 0.5%, which we wouldn't even see until years 2 and 3. Since the start of our strike, that's the only movement they've made. And at our salary, that's about a $10 per month movement, which is not going to make a dent in our in the real struggle that we face in affording basic necessities, rent, food, childcare.
You can barely afford rent, and they're giving you like another chicken breast.
Really, 80% of us are rent burdened by HUD standards. We have real problems. I know I no longer live in Ann Arbor. I've been priced out of living in Ann Arbor. I now live in the surrounding area. But when I was living in Ann Arbor in the first few years that I worked for the University of Michigan, I would have trouble with landlords. When I was renting, they were like, I can't just rent to you. I need you to have a guarantor because you don't make enough money to rent this apartment. Yeah. And that is something that, most of our members face because we don't make enough money on our salaries to rent in the city that we work.
Wow.
God, that's absurd.
So the line of response that the administration has given you is just that they shouldn't have to consider your cost of living when paying you a salary? That seems insane to me. You got to be able to afford to live, right?
We have to be able to afford to live. Yes, absolutely. And apparently that's a hot take.
Not a consideration, right?
It's off the table somewhat.
Not a consideration for them. And this is not something that the university has no role in. For example, the university has kind of created a housing crisis in the city of Ann Arbor. This is not something that they have been totally hands-off in. One of the university regents, Weiser, he is the largest landlord in Ann Arbor.
Oh.
Wow.
Okay. Sounds like a bit of a conflict there.
Yeah, and he is the landlord for many of our workers, and rents are going up by $300 a year, $400 a year. It's not something that the university is not have a vested interest in. And the housing crisis in Ann Arbor is partially created by the fact that the university has not created a lot of student dormitories and such in the last few years.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting to me because it seems, based off your description, that they have a hand in driving costs up, not only in housing, but I'm sure in other places tuition continues to climb, other education-related expenses, yet they feel they don't have a responsibility to mediate those costs for people that are working for them, people that are providing profit. It's always an interesting dynamic to me when I see that play out.
And it also seems interesting.
Absolutely.
Oh, my bad. You go.
No, I was just agreeing. Sorry, go
okay,
ahead.
No problem. It also seems interesting to me that, like you said, he's the largest landlord in Ann Arbor, owns a lot of the housing that's there that you guys have to buy. It seems interesting that they wouldn't want to increase wages so that they could afford to make the rents that they set, especially when they increase them year over year.
So you had mentioned compensation, trans healthcare, a couple of other things. Are there other demands on the table right now that you feel aren't being met or are not being addressed?
Right. So something that we're currently discussing the details on, I say we're kind of far apart on the details on, is harassment protections for workers. Grad workers the University of Michigan is kind of becoming notorious for sexual harassment scandals, I would say.
Oh, wow.
There was just a recent case that just came out, the Stevenson case, in which a supervisor was abusing his employees who were graduate students. And so this is something that is very important to us. By U of M's own survey of graduate students, U of M's own survey found that 40% of grad student women and 24% of grad student men reported being sexually harassed while they were at the University of Michigan.
Wow, that is unacceptably
That's absurd.
high.
Yeah, really absurd numbers there. So this is something that is really important to graduate workers, that we get this in our contract. So what the union proposed was the expansion of this thing called a transitional funding program.
Okay.
It already exists in one of the colleges at the University of Michigan. We just like this at all of the colleges at the University of Michigan. And what it is when you're a graduate student, your boss, your supervisor, your advisor has a lot of power over you.
Yeah.
More so than any other particular type of job, because this person not only has control over your current employment, but also your future employment, and also over whether or not you're going to graduate. So it's kind of a threefold thing. They have control over your current job, your future job, and whether you're going to graduate. So it's a very intense power dynamic there.
Okay.
So that, combined with the fact that universities are on a semester system, and therefore you can't really switch jobs easily mid-semester because there are no jobs posted mid-semester.
Right.
Yeah, means that you can't get away from an abusive relationship with your boss, your supervisor, your advisor easily if they start harassing you mid-semester or something like that. So this program that was started in one of the colleges, the LS&A College at the University of Michigan, basically provides transitional funding. Basically says, if your boss, your advisor, your supervisor starts harassing you, it will, instead of you having to quit, leave, be without a job until the next job cycle comes around, basically says you can leave that person and still get paid until you can get another job at the university.
And they rejected this?
Well, we're in agreement that it should exist.
Okay.
And that's what we're in agreement on right now. It took us a couple of months to get to the point that we're in agreement that it should exist. Right now, we're at the point where the university HR says that it's fine that this exists, but you have to make a non-anonymous report of the faculty member.
Oh.
That seems to cause some problems,
Yeah, you have to make a anonymous report. It's out of your hands whether they pursue a case or not. A non-anonymous report that they get to respond to.
That
so no real
and staff
no real guarantees basically is what they're saying. No real guarantees.
Yeah, we would like the person we would basically like the victim to get to choose whether they would like to make a report or not. We think that would be some basic decency, would be to let the person choose whether they'd like to make a report or not. HR would not like that. They would like that to be completely out of that person's hand. They would like basically the Title IX office to determine whether they'd like to whether there's a case there or not. Basically,
to me, it sounds similar to like when you hear about someone being sexual assaulted and people who deny that saying, well, why didn't you go to the cops? Well, why not just like file a police report? It sounds like that.
Yeah, it does. It does sound like that.
Yeah. And we know that that's wrong. Like we've been known.
We do.
Universities themselves tell us it's wrong.
Yeah, the thing is that the University of Michigan has funded research that shows that this kind of mandatory reporting does not work, and it leads to people not coming forward.
Yeah. It seems to me that the best thing to do would be to let the victim have their own agency and to make workers as comfortable as you can make them. But that's really interesting that they don't seem to want to find common ground, I guess.
This is stuff coming out of the HR office, which is the office that handles a lot of these initial complaints. So you think that they'd be maybe more open to this kind of thing, but apparently not. The other issue is that even though our contract often has elements of it that extend beyond what's called in labor terms the bargaining unit, so people that are explicitly covered by the contract. So our contract covers basically student teachers and student staff assistants. It doesn't cover research assistants because in the state of Michigan, research assistants are not considered employees because of a carve out in the right to work law.
Classic.
But there are a lot of parts of our contract that still by policy kind of apply to them, such as our salary applies to them. Our health benefits apply to them, stuff like that. But HR is like, this particular thing, they're not allowed to have that.
Interesting. Yeah.
So
that seems like a common tactic amongst employers to kind of exclude some people from certain benefits or like compensation, et cetera. Yeah.
It's just wild that they're like, they can have the compensation part, they can have the health benefits part, but sexual harassment protection.
Right, that's the one thing.
This is where we draw the line.
When we do research onto this, and we've published some leading research on it, that's insane. That's insane.
So
it's weird that that's the hill they want to die on, but
So building on top of that, you guys have been on strike since March, you said. That's quite a long time, especially with some students going away for the summer, a lot of people not being enrolled in classes. Have there been any moments so far that you have found particularly, I don't know, detestable, for lack of a better word, on behalf of the university? Has there been moments where you are kind of just looking at the situation like, I cannot believe they said this, or I can't believe they did this?
Just befuddled.
Probably the most like let this radicalize you moment. I think probably there is a misconception that because our employer is a university and so therefore maybe like a liberal leftist institution that maybe they don't have an interest in union busting or using anything they can to against the union or anything like that. But definitely that moment came when we were in court and the university filed the injunction against the union to try and basically use the legal system to force the union to not be on strike anymore, which is something that in the state of Michigan that public employers can do. And then the university hired lawyers compared the workers to domestic abusers.
Wow.
What?
That's crazy.
What?
In open court? Yeah. They were like, I would compare this to a situation with a domestic abuser.
Yeah.
Interesting legal strategy.
The union's lawyer got it struck from the record, but really was just, they will say anything, do anything.
Yeah.
Moment.
It is kind of amazing just realizing how separate, like, I guess the academic side of a university is from the business side of a university and everything that goes on with that.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
That's nuts.
Have you felt as though, typically when people think of strikes, they'll think of, an employer who's very greedy, who's out for money, and the workers maybe who are striking to get better pay. Have you felt like doing a strike against the University of Michigan has been a little bit harder, maybe rhetorically or optically, because a lot of the time administrators pretend to be like, oh, well, of course I want to help students. Of course we're in favor of them speaking their mind. And then behind closed doors, they'll say, but we're not going to pay them more. They don't deserve to have this much money to live, that kind of thing. Do you feel like it's a weird dichotomy?
It is an interesting dichotomy. I think something that helps that is that, and this is something that I think is good for the power of unions of public employers, particularly graduate unions, is that our employers are subject to FOIA, and that's a particularly powerful tool for us. Our employers have public budget information, public financial information, which is Googleable. Yeah. So a couple of weeks ago, the university got a new PR person and apparently completely switched strategies and was like, we can't afford the graduate compensation proposal. It would cost too much for the university. We cannot afford it. And everybody was just like,
Yeah.
We have the receipts.
It's kind of
We
amazing.
have the receipts.
Just how I guess stupid they think that everyone else is when they know they're a public institution. They know all of this is accessible by anyone to just go up and lie.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, it's bold. It's
Their
a bold,
budgets
bold
are
strategy.
fully online. It's a $17 billion institution in a private endowment. It has hundreds of millions in just the general fund, which is just money from tuition and such. I mean, the university could afford to pay out the full 3-year contract to every graduate student and just give us like a check for the next 3 years of our salary in hand, like tomorrow, and not feel it.
Right.
yeah.
It's a huge university. Yeah.
It's a huge university. It's one of the richest universities in the world,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
but likes to be like, oh, but we're just a little public university.
Yeah.
We're just a little poor public university. We can't possibly afford to pay you.
Yeah, they're the victims here. Those mean strikers are really
Exactly.
being mean to the board of regents.
But even that
Yeah.
just makes it not make sense the way that they're holding out so hard on the sexual harassment stuff. Like my mind just keeps going back to that because it's so baffling.
Yeah.
It is. It's that in particular is literally just like, what if you just paid someone for 2 months so that they could get away from a boss that was sexually harassing them?
Yeah.
And they're like, what if we didn't do that?
We're like, yeah, that's like a good idea, but little poor old public university us.
Yeah. So to
Yeah,
the
what
point,
if we did? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to just ask, to the point of the University of Michigan being an enormous university, you have, say, 50,000 plus students that are on campus. How has the community, you think, responded to the strike? Faculty members, staff members, undergraduate students. Have you felt like you've been supported by the community? Has there been a lack of support? What do you think?
I think we've been generally supported by, especially the student community was pretty supportive of us, especially as the semester came to a close and things like that. Definitely, like, I was on the picket lines as the semester came to a close. I know it was really stressful for students not having their grades and stuff like that. I was doing a lot of flyering, picketing, doing one-on-one conversations with students, and they were definitely very supportive of the strike in general, generally more so than not. I'm really proud of my students for how supportive they were of the strike. Genuinely very heartwarming to see how much support we got from the undergraduate population.
Right.
There was a lot of support for the strike. Obviously, the administration less supportive of the
Of
strike,
course.
leading to gross academic fraud and misconduct as they massively committed academic fraud to get grades in.
Yeah,
I see.
I'd read a lot of stories around the end of the semester about grade inflation. Can you explain what happened there?
Right. So not only grade inflation.
Okay.
Yeah. So there was a lot of cases of grade inflation of department chairs, of administration just entering all A's for classes. We know this happened. We have receipts. We have emails from administration instructing departments to do this. We know that this happened.
Yeah.
There were also cases of like non-instructional staff being instructed to grade. This also led to a lot of problems with students ending up with lower grades than they expected because people who had not ever met the students were trying to grade their work based on, rubrics that they had never seen, based on standards that they had never seen before. We know of cases where students did not get their disability accommodations for their finals.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And I know of at least one case where students were asked to fill out their final grades on a Google form for the department. So I really hope all the students in that class got A's.
So not only is the university hurting graduate workers because materially you can't afford to live, but they're also kind of just making a mockery of their own academic system by screwing up the grades of regular students that aren't even involved here.
Yeah, I think it's really harmful to the reputation of the institution. And I say this as somebody who will get a University of Michigan degree. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
when they're just entering A's for everyone or entering fake grades for everyone. What does that piece of paper mean? I think this is especially going to be harmful for students in classes where grades are particularly, material. So grades for language classes or grades for like math classes, where your grade is actually an indication of like how much you understand that subject and whether you should continue on to the next level of that class.
Right.
Yeah.
So like your grade in Spanish is like, do you know this language in Spanish 1 well enough to proceed on to Spanish 2? And if everyone in Spanish 1 got an A, then
Right. Yeah, it's going to cause major problems down the road. Yeah.
Absolutely. If you can't do Calc 1, you can't do Calc 2.
Yeah.
Like, it's simple as that. And it is amazing that such a prestigious university will just go and say, at the moment that things get tough, say, okay, you know what, we'll let someone who's not familiar with this content or not familiar with how this class is run just grade these papers and determine these kids' future in a way.
And it's absolutely because the university was not planning on settling the strike at the negotiation table. They were not planning on ever making a serious offer. They were planning on ending the strike in court. They were planning on a court order to end the strike.
So
we know via FOIA requests that they were planning a strike since at least the end of 2022. Long before we were ever we as graduate workers were ever discussing the possibility of a strike, they were making payments to their injunction lawyers, which the university has general counsel. The university has labor lawyers that they pay for bargaining. So they were just paying these injunction lawyers for the purpose of suing the union workers to come back to work.
So that almost is more sinister to me. It kind of goes to show you that they knew what they've been doing, how they've been treating you would result in something, and they were just prepping for it, and now acting as though they've been benevolent the whole time. That's kind of just evil.
Again, we did not go on strike until March. We did not hold our strike votes until March. We weren't even talking about striking until late February, early March. So this was not even on the horizon until then.
They were prepping the union busting like crazy. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Oh my God. And I mean, while we're still on the topic of students at U of M and general reception from the community, have you noticed maybe if I don't know the College Conservatives Club, Turning Point USA at UMich, if they've had anything crazy to say about the strike or?
Yeah, I've definitely seen at least one counter protest, if you can call it that.
Okay, word.
With a couple of signs on the diag, which is the central kind of part of campus or whatever, with a guy with a sign saying the strike is ruining students' lives or something like that.
For sure.
Sick.
I wouldn't say that it's a very big movement
I would hope
or anything like that.
I just had to wonder if they brought out the lazy allegations yet.
Yeah, we talk about college conservatives sometimes on our show, and we just sometimes what they do baffles us a little bit, to say the least.
They're definitely out there. I saw that particular counter protest.
Right.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call it a counter strike. That sounds too cool.
Facts.
So
don't want to give that to them.
Coming down to our last few questions here, we've seen over the last couple of years, especially since COVID, a small but I still think significant increase in labor action from Starbucks to John Deere. Even the railroad workers, the writers in LA are on strike right now. How do you feel your strike kind of fits into that? Can we glean anything from just the general trend of workers being dissatisfied? Do you think your strike fits into it?
Right. GEO is one of the oldest graduate unions in the country. It's been around since the 70s. But I do think that there is a larger graduate labor movement that's kind of part of this larger labor movement that's going on right now in the US, that's part of the insane inflation, cost of living changes, and the feeling that people are really dissatisfied. And I think that unions are one of the way that people feel that they can kind of express themselves and make like tangible change in their own lives, and organize in their own lives. I think that graduate unions are part of this larger labor movement that's going on right now. There have been a lot of new graduate unions in recent years. I think it was someone in one of the unions, one of the newer union campaigns out in Pennsylvania, that said that graduate unions are like cockroaches because of the high turnover in jobs, that their union campaign had been like completely crushed by the university like 10 years ago, but that now it was like having a revitalization of the movement because they had a completely new workforce from 10 years ago. I think that's great. Another thing about sort of this unionization movement is that I think people are realizing, and I kind of heard this / am stealing it from, I heard a thing from someone, a labor organizer in the UK, talking about organizing hospitality workers, particularly people who work in pubs in the UK, and talking about how the difficulty of organizing people who feel like they're not in their career for life, or who feel like who feel like they can't be in a union, who can't change their working conditions if you're in a job just for right now. And I think that now, at least in the US, people like at Starbucks or people in graduate unions are feeling like, yeah, this might not be the job that I'm in for the rest of my life, but that doesn't mean it has to suck.
Yeah, for sure.
That doesn't mean I don't have to, I have to be struggling paycheck to paycheck. That doesn't mean I can't afford childcare. That doesn't mean I can't afford food. That doesn't mean I deserve to be harassed at work. So I think there is like a realization that you can organize, that there's more power in a union, that there's more power in multiple people organizing against large corporations, large employers. Even if it's like, as with graduate workers, like not the job that you're going to have, and especially with us, because we have like set contracts and things like that. That's not the job that you're going to have in 10 years, but that doesn't mean that you need to starve while you're doing it.
It may be a stepping stone to something better, but it doesn't have to be bad.
And I think your description is right. I think a lot of people, especially younger people now, are asking, why shouldn't things be better? Why should I have to be subjected to bad working conditions or workplace harassment or poor pay, low compensation? Why shouldn't I take part in the massive profits that, say, the University of Michigan takes in?
Right, absolutely. I totally agree.
So our last question here for you before we end this interview out. Strikes are stressful. It's all about the collective, of course, but it's made up of individuals. What do you and your fellow union members do to make sure that it doesn't get to you too much? What do you do to recharge?
We have dance parties, which pisses off the university so much.
For real.
The regents wrote a very angry letter that they all signed against
against
these
the dance
graduate
party?
A letter against happiness,
These graduate workers are having dance parties. Yeah, we have dance parties. We have union cinema this summer every 2 weeks.
Cool.
It's all great fun. We have the strike kitchen during the semester, which feeds us at lunchtime and stuff like that. It's all great. I think strikes are incredibly stressful, but it's also a time where, one, I'm meeting a ton of people that I wouldn't otherwise meet because they're just, in different work units, in different departments, things like that. So it's also a time of, great organizing, mutual aid, friendships, stuff like that. So I think it's incredibly stressful, but the unity is there. The solidarity is there. It's lovely to all be working toward the same goal and to dance sometimes.
Of course.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Meg, thanks for coming on the show. Just before we close out, is there anything our listeners can do if they want to support the strike? Like, where can they find you? Feel free to shout anything out.
Right. So the university is preparing for a fall strike. We would not like to be on strike in the fall, but apparently they would like us to be on strike in the fall. They're already sending out emails and such preparing for a fall strike. So you can give to our strike fund.
Okay.
All of that money goes directly to striking workers who are facing the most hardship due to cut paychecks and such. Because if there is a fall strike, the university will inevitably cut our paychecks. So that is at butter like margarine.com/GEO strike fund.
Okay, yeah, we'll have that down in the description so people can get to it easily. Again, thanks for coming on the show.
All right, thanks for having me.
We wish you guys the best of luck. Yeah.
What a riveting interview.
What a great interview.
I think. What an excellent. Shout out Meg. Shout out Meg Burt.
Exactly. Thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us. I hope you all enjoyed that. Of course, Hell is Empty. They're at the Supreme Court and they're at the Board of Regents at the University of Michigan.
And Meg, I hope you're okay with being associated with just Supreme Court hate.
Yeah.
You should be.
Yeah, exactly.
You seem pretty cool.
You know, we had to restrain ourselves from titling this episode. When the affirmative action dropped, I thought that was going to be the only SCOTUS news that we had to cover. And we were going to title the episode SCOTUS Says White Boys Stay Up.
Yeah.
But or it's a white boy summer or something along those lines. But
white boys, because like white boys stay up. Actually, white boys just stay exactly where they are because affirmative action going away isn't going to fucking help you.
Then we took a look at the evidence and amended our position. As any good critical thinker would.
We did a holistic review of what all was going on and decided that, okay, maybe that's not the best title.
Anyway, thank you all for listening to the interview. I hope you enjoyed it. And before we go, as always,
yes.
we got to give a special thanks to our loyal patrons.
You want to take it away?
I'll take it away. Easy peasy.
Take it away.
So special thanks to Nikki Nine Lives, Caden Kraut, Lord T the Radiant, Chris the Postman, Christy Beck, Talia Katz, 40% Spite, Andrew Harris, Mike Chaplinsky, Mattias T, Omar Zuno, Clayton LaFed, Mark Yeager, Sarah McRoberts, Dylan B, Kaz, Caleb Joy, Jim Bobs, Carl D, Rich Toro, Tari, Gavin Meyer, Maldonado, Hunter W, Fergalaki, Max Vasquez, Jacob Rogers, Colton Muberry, Fixer Punk, Jim Egbers, Jeff Muzzy, Bagel Burrito, Cincy Alex, Brad, Joe Stenstrom, Adrian Sandoval, Chloe Sim 601, Colleen Cuts, Gregory Isn't My Name, Very Yook, Jennifer DeVoe, Big Bird Titty, Crawfish, and Benneth Bennington III, Alexia Benanti, Nietzsche, Big Booty Beatdown, Moises T, Sam Maloney, Two-Headed Boy, Ben Shapiro's Boyfriend, Jonathan Cassis, Luke O'Shea, Cucker Tarlson, Danielle Jackson, The Word of Microsoft, Jennifer Science, Aaron is Gundams,
Darth Father, Aiden Taylor, Corey Chambers, Sewer Snack, Ellie N, John Glover, Weed Thief 69, Devin Hatchard, Retro Mondo, Meatball Minion, Emma the Doot Slayer, Claire McMillan, Breezy B, Elijah Murray, Veronica aka V, Raxoon, Ash Smith, The Grotler, Magic Ian 95, Flower Crown, Jasper Hingares, Beetlebugs, Three Co's in a Trench Coat, Lonnie Rogers, Slavic and Sapphic, Cassie Lynn Kelly.
Casey Lynn Kelly?
Fuck.
Goodness. You were on a street.
You know what to do. You go ahead and yell at me in the page. Snake Eyes, In Hope of Giants, AK Gone, Equanodon, Zach Lantian, Info Russell, Austin, JRYF.
No, Austin Grief.
Austin Grief.
I made sure you were saying it right this time.
Oh, that I remember that.
No, Austin Greif. Austin Greif.
That can't even spell it phonetically right. That's.
I'm sorry, Austin.
I'm so sorry, bro. Please don't delete your pledge. Austin Greif. Maybe I shouldn't have taken this part. Marcus Corbett, Caleb Roper, Dustin Waldron, Taylor Rensock, Ishi Teddy. This is guys, I can't read. We've gotten so many new patrons. Like, I love to see it, but not, my eyes don't. Cami Calliope, Reagan Calliope. Fuck.
Reagan, not like the president, and my mom.
That's right.
Thank you all for supporting the show on Patreon. Thanks. I do got to issue an apology real quick. Zach Lantian. Okay. I hope you're listening. I'm going to assume you are. You're a patron. You're probably listening. You're getting your money's worth, if you will. I knew that was how you pronounce the name. I said it wrong last episode.
On
apology
purpose.
Video with tears on its way.
Look, I made a mistake.
Yeah.
Look.
I'm human.
Everybody makes mistakes, bro. Me, Clarence Thomas, like, we all make mistakes. I'm sorry.
I'm going to bust out the ukulele and make an apology video. Apparently, that's the way to deal with things nowadays. So.
Yeah, now all the kids are doing it.
Yeah. Anyways, thanks for listening to the episode. I hope you enjoyed that interview, and we'll catch you all next week.
Have a great week.